The great hall of the Galactic Tribunal stretched wide and tall like a giant crystal cave. Light bounced off the walls in rainbow colors, making strange shadows dance across the floor. Hundreds of alien beings filled the seats that curved around the central platform. Some had 6 arms, others had no arms at all. Some breathed air, others floated in tanks of purple liquid. But they all watched the same thing. A human man stood alone in the center of it all. Ki-hyun Park kept his back straight as he faced the judges. His hands were rough and scarred from years of hard work. His simple gray clothes looked out of place in this fancy courtroom. Around him, the aliens whispered in languages that sounded like music or grinding metal or rushing water. "The defendant will remain silent," said Adjudicator Velthon. The judge was 12 feet tall and made of living crystal. When he spoke, his voice rang like a bell. Light moved through his transparent body like trapped lightning. Ki-hyun said nothing. He had learned not to speak unless asked. These beings did not like humans who talked too much. High above the courtroom, Dr. Yuna Choi sat in the observer section. She was the only other human in the entire building. Her small hands gripped the rail as she watched her fellow human face judgment. She wanted to help, but she could only watch and hope. "We are here today," Velthon continued, "to decide the fate of the human called Ki-hyun Park. He stands accused of violating the sacred preservation protocols. He entered the forbidden tomb world of Veltar Prime. He attempted to take artifacts that belong to the dead." The prosecutor stood up. She was a Zelani, with blue skin and 4 eyes that blinked one at a time. "Honored adjudicator," she said, "this human broke into the most sacred burial ground in this sector. He used crude tools to dig up items that have rested in peace for 10,000 years. He shows no respect for the dead. He shows no respect for our laws." Ki-hyun remembered that day. His cargo ship had broken down near Veltar Prime. He needed parts to fix his engine. The planet looked empty and dead. He thought no one would mind if he took some old metal. He did not know it was a graveyard. He did not know it was forbidden. But that did not matter now. "The evidence is clear," the prosecutor went on. She held up a small device that showed pictures in the air. Security drones recorded everything. The human landed on Veltar Prime at 14:30 Galactic Standard Time. He spent 6 hours digging. He took 17 artifacts before the patrol found him. The images showed Ki-hyun working in the ruins. In the pictures, he looked desperate. His ship was falling apart. Without parts, he would die in space. But to the aliens watching, he just looked like a grave robber. "What does the defendant say?" asked Velthon. Ki-hyun cleared his throat. His voice sounded small in the huge room. "I needed parts to fix my ship. I didn't know it was a graveyard, I'm sorry." Some of the aliens made angry sounds, others just stared at him with cold eyes. "Ignorance is not an excuse," said the prosecutor. The human had a star chart. The chart clearly marked Veltar Prime as forbidden. He chose to ignore the warnings. This was true. Ki-hyun had seen the red marks on his chart, but his engine was dying, and he was 3 days from the nearest port. He thought he could take what he needed and leave before anyone noticed. He was wrong. "The sacred preservation protocols are not suggestions," Velthon said. His crystal body flashed with bright light. "They are laws that protect the most holy places in our galaxy. To break them is to show contempt for all life." Dr. Yuna Choi wanted to stand up and shout. She wanted to tell them that humans were not evil, they were just different. They made mistakes. But she stayed quiet. If she spoke out of turn, they might punish her too. "The penalty for this crime is death," Velthon announced. A cold silence filled the room. Even the translator devices stopped humming. However, the adjudicator continued. "This tribunal does not believe in execution. We are civilized beings. We do not kill, even criminals." Ki-hyun felt a tiny bit of hope. "Instead," Velthon said, "the defendant will be exiled to a Deathworld. He will be given basic supplies and left to face the consequences of his actions. If he is worthy of life, perhaps he will survive. If not, nature will decide his fate." The hope died in Ki-hyun's chest. Which world? Asked the prosecutor. Caleth 7, Belthon replied. Gasps and shocked sounds came from the crowd. Even the aliens who hated Ki-hyun looked surprised. Dr. Yuna Choi went pale. Caleth 7 was famous throughout the galaxy. It was the worst death world anyone knew about. The surface temperature could freeze you solid or cook you alive, sometimes within the same hour. The air was poison. The ground was covered in crystal creatures that hunted anything that moved. Radiation storms could kill you from the inside out. No one had ever survived more than 3 days on Caleth 7. Most died within hours. That is not exile, Dr. Choi whispered to herself. That is murder. The sentence will be carried out immediately, Belthon declared. The defendant will be transported to Caleth 7 within the next Galactic Standard Day. This court is dismissed. The crystal gavel rang like a death bell. As the aliens filed out of the courtroom, many of them looked at Ki-hyun with something like pity. They thought they were being merciful. They thought they were giving him a chance. They did not understand that they were sending him to the most horrible death imaginable. Security guards came to take Ki-hyun away. As they led him past the observer section, he looked up at Dr. Choi. She was crying. She mouthed the words, "I'm sorry," but there was nothing she could do. Ki-hyun nodded at her. He was not angry. He knew she had tried to help. He knew this was his fault. He had made a bad choice, and now he had to pay for it. But as they took him to his cell, something strange happened. Instead of feeling scared or sorry for himself, Ki-hyun started thinking. He had survived in space for 15 years. He had fixed broken ships with nothing but scrap metal and hope. He had lived through engine failures, meteor storms, and pirate attacks. Maybe, just maybe, he could survive this too. The galaxy was about to learn something important about humans. They were about to learn that sometimes the worst punishment could become the greatest opportunity. But first, Ki-hyun had to live through hell. The transport ship was small and cold. Ki-hyun sat alone in a metal box barely big enough for one person. No windows. No pilot. Just him and the machine that would take him to his death. The ship's computer spoke in a flat, emotionless voice. Destination Caleth 7. Arrival in 37 minutes. Prisoner will prepare for deployment. Ki-hyun looked at the supplies they had given him. A radiation suit that looked old and patched. A small container of water purification tablets. Some emergency food bars that tasted like cardboard. An emergency beacon that no one would ever answer. The aliens thought they were being kind. They thought they were giving him a chance to survive. But everyone knew the truth. Caleth 7 was where people went to die. 15 minutes to deployment, the computer announced. Ki-hyun put on the radiation suit. It was too big for him and smelled like chemicals. The helmet was scratched and hard to see through, but it was better than nothing. 5 minutes to deployment. Through the metal walls, Ki-hyun could hear the ship's engines changing. They were slowing down, getting ready to drop him off like a piece of unwanted cargo. Deployment in 30 seconds. The floor beneath him started to move. It was opening up. Below him, he could see the surface of Caleth 7 getting closer. The planet looked like a nightmare. The ground was covered in sharp, glowing crystals that stretched up like frozen lightning. Between them, pools of bubbling liquid gave off green and yellow smoke. The sky was dark red, filled with swirling clouds that flashed with angry light. Deployment now. The floor opened completely. Ki-hyun fell. For a few terrible seconds, he dropped through the poisonous air. His parachute opened with a loud snap, jerking him upward. Then he drifted down toward the crystal forest below. He landed hard on ground that crunched like broken glass under his feet. The impact knocked the wind out of him. For a moment, he just lay there trying to breathe through the suit's air recycler. The first thing he noticed was the sound. The crystals around him were singing. High, sharp notes that made his teeth hurt. They rang and chimed like a twisted music box. Some of the sounds were so high he could barely hear them. Others were so low they made his bones vibrate. The second thing he noticed was the heat. Even through his suit, he could feel the temperature rising. The planet's sun was coming up, and it was bringing fire with it. In just a few minutes, the surface temperature would climb high enough to cook him alive. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the movement. The crystals were moving. Not fast, but definitely moving. They turned toward him like flowers following the sun. As they moved, their singing got louder and hungrier. Ki-hyun scrambled to his feet. His training from years in space kicked in. First rule of survival: stay calm. Second rule: understand your environment. Third rule: find shelter. He looked around quickly. About 50 meters away, there was a crack in the ground. Steam was rising from it. That meant geothermal activity, underground heat. Maybe he could use that. The crystals were definitely tracking him now. The ones closest to him had stopped singing and started making a different sound. A grinding, scraping noise like metal on stone. They were growing taller, reaching toward him with sharp, grabbing arms. Ki-hyun ran. His boots slipped on the glassy ground. The suit was clumsy and made it hard to move fast. Behind him, he could hear the crystal hunters crashing through their neighbors, chasing him with sounds like breaking windows. He reached the crack in the ground just as the first crystal hunter caught up. A long, sharp arm swept through the air, where his head had been a second before. Ki-hyun rolled sideways and dropped into the crack. The space was narrow and hot, but the crystals couldn't follow him. They gathered at the edge, reaching down with their glowing arms, but they couldn't fit through the opening. Ki-hyun crawled deeper into the crack. The walls were warm rock, not crystal. Down here, he could barely hear the singing. The hunters, above him, made frustrated sounds and eventually moved away. He found a wider space about 10 meters down. It was like a small cave, heated by underground vents. Hot, but not deadly hot. The air was still poisonous, but his suit could handle it, for a while. For the first time since landing, Ki-hyun allowed himself to think. The crystals hunted by movement and heat. They sang to communicate with each other. They couldn't fit into small spaces. And they seemed to avoid the geothermal areas. That was useful information. He spent the next hour exploring the crack system. It went deeper than he had expected, connecting to other cracks and eventually to larger caves. Some of the caves had pools of clean water heated by underground springs. Others had deposits of strange minerals that glowed with their own light. Most importantly, he found evidence that others had been here before. Scattered bones lay in some of the deeper caves, not human bones, but the remains of other aliens who had been sent here to die. Their equipment was old and broken, but some of it might still be useful. In one cave, he found a Volcari breathing apparatus that was almost intact. In another, he discovered a Zilani heat generator that just needed new power cells. Most exciting of all, he found a broken communication device that might be repairable. As the planet's sun reached its peak, the surface temperature climbed to over 300 degrees. The crack system protected him from the worst of it, but he could still feel the heat trying to cook him alive. That's when he realized something important. The aliens who had died here before him had made the same mistake. They had tried to survive, on the surface. They had fought the planet instead of learning from it. But Ki-hyun was different. He had spent years fixing broken things with whatever he could find. He had learned to see patterns where others saw only chaos. And he was starting to see a pattern in this deadly world. The crystals weren't just random monsters. They had rules. They responded to certain things and ignored others. The geothermal areas weren't just hotspots. They were safe zones where the crystals wouldn't go. Most importantly, this planet wasn't just trying to kill everything on it. It was trying to protect something. As the day wore on and the temperature began to drop, Ki-hyun started making plans. He would need to modify his equipment. He would need to learn more about the crystal hunters, and he would need to figure out what this planet was really hiding. The aliens thought they had sent him here to die. They were about to learn how wrong they were. When the planet's sun set and the temperature dropped to nearly 200 degrees below zero, Ki-hyun was ready. He had found materials to insulate his shelter. He had clean water and a heat source. He had salvaged equipment that might help him survive. But more than that, he had hope. For the first time since his trial, Ki-hyun Park smiled. This planet was dangerous, but it wasn't impossible. and he was going to prove that to the entire galaxy. 1 week after landing on Caleth 7, Ki-hyun was still alive. This was already impossible by galactic standards. The monitoring station that watched Deathworlds had never recorded a survival time longer than 72 hours. But Ki-hyun's emergency beacon kept beeping, sending its signal into space every 6 hours like clockwork. Hana Lim stared at her screen in confusion. She worked at the monitoring station, tracking the signals from condemned prisoners. Her job was simple: watch the beacon until it stopped, then file a death report. But Ki-hyun's beacon wasn't stopping. "Computer," she said, "run a diagnostic on beacon signal 7749K. "Diagnostic complete," the computer replied. "Beacon is functioning normally." "Subject is alive," Hana frowned. "That's impossible. Show me the planet data for Caleth 7. The screen filled with information. Surface temperature swings of over 500 degrees. Poisonous atmosphere. Radiation levels that could kill most species in hours. Crystal predators that had never failed to catch their prey. "Are you sure the beacon is working?" she asked. "Affirmative. Signal strength is strong and steady." Down on the planet's surface, Ki-hyun had learned why he was still breathing. The secret was in the minerals. During his second day in the caves, he had noticed something strange. The water from the underground springs tasted metallic, but didn't make him sick. In fact, after drinking it for several days, he felt stronger than before. His radiation suit sensors showed that the minerals in the water were actually helping his body handle the planet's radiation. Somehow, the toxic environment was making him healthier instead of killing him. But that wasn't the only thing he had discovered. The crystal hunters weren't really hunting him anymore. It had taken him 3 days to figure out why. On his 4th day, while exploring a deeper cave system, he had slipped and fallen into a pool of mineral-rich mud. When he climbed out, covered in the gray-green substance, something had changed. The crystal hunters ignored him completely. He had walked right past a group of them, and they hadn't even turned in his direction. It was like he had become invisible. The mud was the key. It contained the same minerals as the underground springs. When he covered himself with it, the crystals couldn't sense him anymore. Or maybe they could sense him, but they thought he belonged here. After 2 weeks, Ki-hyun had established a routine. He spent the hot hours of the day deep underground, exploring the cave systems. During the cold periods, he would venture onto the surface, always covered in his mineral mud camouflage. Tzatker, surface exploration revealed something amazing. The crystal formations weren't random. They were organized in patterns like a vast network. Some crystals seemed to be sending signals to others. When one sang, distant crystals would sing back in harmony. It reminded him of something he had seen before: communication arrays. Crystals were talking to each other. During his 3rd week, Ki-hyun made his biggest discovery yet. While following a crystal song deep underground, he found ruins. They were old, older than anything he had ever seen. The walls were covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. The rooms were filled with devices that hummed with ancient power. And in the center of the largest room, he found something that changed everything. Control panel that was still working. The symbols on the panel were strange, but some of them looked familiar. They reminded him of the mathematical symbols used in hyperspace navigation. Universal concepts that any intelligent species would recognize. It took him 4 days to figure out how to activate the panel safely. When he did, the entire chamber lit up with soft blue light. Screens appeared in the air showing images of the planet from above. But not the planet as it was now. The planet as it used to be. Thousands of years ago, Caleth 7 had been beautiful. Green forests covered the surface. Blue oceans sparkled under a gentle sun. Cities of crystal and metal stretched across continents. But something had happened. The images showed a great disaster, ships fleeing into space. The planet's surface being transformed into the hellish landscape Ki-hyun knew. But why? The answer came to him slowly as he studied the ancient controls. This wasn't destruction. It was protection. The planet's original inhabitants had turned their world into a death world on purpose. They had made it so dangerous that no one would ever want to come here. No one would ever try to take what they had hidden. But what were they hiding? During his second month on Caleth 7, Ki-hyun began to understand. The crystal network wasn't just a communication system, it was a storage system. Each crystal contained information, vast amounts of information. The ruins weren't just buildings, they were libraries, data storage facilities that contained the knowledge of an entire civilization, and he was starting to think that civilization hadn't been alone. On his 60th day, Ki-hyun made a decision that would shock the galaxy. He was going to make contact. Using salvaged equipment from the various alien remains in the caves, he had slowly built a communication device. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. More importantly, he had figured out how to connect it to the crystal network. The crystals weren't just storage devices, they were amplifiers. With their help, he could send a signal strong enough to reach the monitoring station. Hana Lim was having a quiet day when her equipment suddenly screamed with incoming signals. "What the hell?" she muttered, checking her screens. The signal was coming from Caleth 7. But that was impossible. The planet's radiation should have destroyed any communication equipment within hours. "Hello?" came a voice through the static. "Is anyone listening? This is Ki-hyun Park." Hana nearly fell out of her chair. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I know you can hear me," Ki-hyun's voice continued. "I know someone is monitoring this frequency. I need you to listen carefully. Everything we know about Caleth 7 is wrong." Hana's hands shook as she opened a recording channel. Whatever was happening, she needed to document it. "This planet isn't just a Deathworld," Ki-hyun said. "It's a vault, a hiding place for something incredible. The crystal formations aren't predators, they're guardians. And I think I know what they're guarding." The signal crackled with interference, but Ki-hyun's voice came through clearly. "I've found ruins down here. Ancient technology that still works. Data storage systems beyond anything we have now. And the information they contain, it's not just from one species, it's from hundreds, maybe thousands." Hana started breathing faster. If this was real, the original inhabitants of this planet collected knowledge from across the galaxy. Ki-hyun continued. Scientific discoveries, cultural records, historical data from civilizations that died out millions of years ago. They stored it all here, and then made the planet too dangerous for anyone to find it. The signal was getting stronger, clearer. "But here's the thing," Ki-hyun said, and Hana could hear the smile in his voice. "I'm not just surviving down here. I'm thriving. This planet, that was supposed to kill me in 3 days? It's been feeding me, protecting me, teaching me." Hana realized she was crying. A human had survived on the most dangerous world in the galaxy for 2 months. And he wasn't just alive. He was discovering treasures beyond imagination. "I think," Ki-hyun's voice said through the static, "the galaxy needs to know what's really down here, and I think humans might be the only ones who can unlock it." The transmission ended, leaving Hana staring at her equipment in shock. Everything was about to change. Hana Lim's hands were still shaking when she sent the recording to her supervisor. Within an hour, the message had reached the highest levels of galactic government. By the end of the day, it was playing in the emergency session of the Galactic Tribunal. The same crystal chamber where Ki-hyun had been sentenced to death was now filled with shocked whispers and angry arguments. "This is impossible," Adjudicator Velthon declared, his crystal body flashing with agitated light. "No being can survive on Caleth 7 for 8 weeks. The monitoring equipment must be malfunctioning." Dr. Yuna Choi stood up in the observer section. She had been quiet during Ki-hyun's trial, but not anymore. "Permission to speak, Adjudicator," she said. "Dr. Choi, this is not the time for—" "With respect, sir, this is exactly the time." Yuna's voice was steady but firm. "You sent my colleague to die because you thought it was mercy. Now he's trying to tell us something important, and you're calling it impossible instead of listening." The chamber fell silent. Other aliens turned to stare at the small human woman who had just challenged the highest judge in the galaxy. "What are you suggesting?" Velthon asked coldly. I'm suggesting we send a rescue mission to Calith-7, Yuna replied. Not to save Ki-hyun, he seems to be doing fine, but to verify his claims. If he's really found what he says he's found, it could change everything. Ambassador Woojin Kim, representing Earth in the tribunal, stood up to support her. The human government officially requests permission to mount a rescue operation. We will provide our own ships and personnel. Absolutely not, snapped the prosecutor, who had condemned Ki-hyun. Calith-7 is a death world. We cannot risk more lives on the word of one desperate criminal. Then how do you explain the transmission? Yuna asked. How do you explain 8 weeks of survival where your own records show no one has ever lasted more than 3 days? Belthon's crystal form went dark as he considered. Finally, he spoke. We will send an automated probe to investigate. If the human is truly alive, we will reassess the situation. No, Yuna said firmly. Probes won't work. Ki-hyun said the planet's radiation destroys most equipment. You need living beings to verify this. And apparently, you need humans. 3 days later, a small rescue ship approached Calith-7. On board were Dr. Yuna Choi, Ambassador Woojin Kim, and Dr. Minji Seo, a specialist in extreme environment biology. Also aboard were 2 Galactic Tribunal observers who still believed they were coming to collect a dead body. The ship's sensors confirmed what everyone already knew. The planet's surface was absolutely deadly. Radiation levels that would kill most species in minutes. Temperature swings that could freeze or cook anything living. And the crystal formations that sang their deadly songs across the wasteland. There. Yuna pointed at her screen. Ki-hyun's beacon signal, it's coming from underground. How deep? Asked Dr. Seo. About 50 meters below the surface. And the signal is strong. As they prepared to land, a communication came through on the crystal network frequency that Ki-hyun had discovered. Welcome to Calith-7, came Ki-hyun's voice, clear and strong. I've been expecting you. Follow my beacon signal to the safe landing zone. And don't worry about the crystal hunters, I've taught them that humans are friends. The 2 tribunal observers looked at each other in shock. Not only was the condemned human alive, he sounded healthier than when they had last seen him. Landing zone was a flat area surrounded by crystal formations that hummed peacefully, instead of the angry hunting songs the ship's database had described. As the rescue team emerged in their protective suits, they saw something impossible. Ki-hyun. Park walked toward them across the deadly surface with no protective gear at all. He looked different. His skin had a slight metallic shine and his eyes were brighter than before. But he was definitely alive and definitely human. Hello, Dr. Choi, he said with a smile. Thank you for coming. I have so much to show you. Dr. Seo immediately began, scanning Ki-hyun with her medical equipment. The readings made no sense. This is impossible, she muttered. His cellular structure has been modified by mineral absorption, but instead of killing him, it's made him stronger. His bones are denser, his metabolism is more efficient, and his radiation resistance is off the charts. The planet did this to me, Ki-hyun explained as he led them toward the cave entrance. It's not trying to kill visitors. It's testing them, seeing if they're worthy of what's hidden down here. What they found in the underground ruins shocked everyone into silence. The ancient chambers stretched for kilometers beneath the surface. Room after room filled with information storage devices that still functioned after millions of years. Art. Galleries with works from civilizations that had vanished before most of the tribunal species had evolved. Scientific databases containing discoveries that were centuries ahead of current galactic knowledge. This is the largest collection of information in the known galaxy, Yuna whispered as she stared at walls covered in data crystals. Knowledge from thousands of species, preserved here for safekeeping. But why hide it like this? Asked Ambassador Kim. Ki-hyun led them to the main control chamber. Because they knew that someday the galaxy would need this information. But they also knew that if it was easy to find, it would be fought over, stolen, or destroyed. So they made it impossible to reach. Impossible for everyone except humans, Dr. Seo added, studying her readings. Your species' evolutionary background on a high-radiation extreme climate world has given you natural advantages. You can adapt to environments that kill other species. One of the tribunal observers, a tall, gray-skinned Nathrani, spoke for the first time since landing. If this is true, then we have made a terrible mistake. What mistake? Asked Yuna. We assumed that all species are the same, that what is impossible for us must be impossible for everyone. But humans are different. You come from a world that most of us would consider a death world. To you, places like this are just challenging. 6 months later, the Galactic Tribunal had changed completely. Ki-Hyun Park now led the Department of Extreme World Exploration, a new branch of galactic science dedicated to finding and studying dangerous worlds that might contain hidden treasures. Dr. Yuna Choi ran the Xenobiology Research Division, studying how different species adapted to extreme environments. Hana Lim, the communications officer who had first received Ki-Hyun's impossible transmission, now managed the Crystal Network Communication Project, using the technology from Caleth-7 to create faster communication across the galaxy. Most importantly, humans were no longer seen as weak or primitive by galactic society. They were recognized as natural explorers and survivors, uniquely suited to uncovering the galaxy's most dangerous secrets. It's funny, Ki-Hyun said to Yuna, as they stood in the main chamber of Caleth-7, now converted into a research station. They sentenced me to death and instead gave me the greatest gift in the galaxy. What's that? She asked. The chance to prove that sometimes the things that make you different are exactly what the universe needs. Above them, the crystal formations sang their ancient songs, no longer hunting for prey but welcoming new visitors. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about judging others too quickly, and somewhere in the vast network of information surrounding them, the knowledge of 1 million extinct civilizations waited to help the living species avoid the same fate. The Deathworld had become a gateway to the future, and humanity had become its guardians. The trial that was meant to end one human's life had instead opened up possibilities for all life in the galaxy. Sometimes the worst punishment really could become the greatest gift.